I actually believe the women of the world of all ages are particularly equipped for leadership in this time. The unique gifts that women bring to leadership, but the way that obstacles and hardship can strengthen those gifts. Well, I believe we're all reinventing leadership in this time. After I knew how much I hated being called a leader, I had to explore to understand what are some models of leadership that I can wholeheartedly aspire to.
Welcome back to Wildflow. Before we drop into today's conversation, I'd like to remind everybody that if you're listening and you've been thinking about becoming a menstrual educator, becoming a leader in your community, sharing empowering spaces for children, for girls and their mothers to learn about the wisdom of their bodies and the menstrual cycle, then applications for the First Moon Circle Facilitator Training are open and closing soon. We are already well over 50% filled, which is absolutely wonderful, with women from all over the world who are passionate and ready to do this work. And so if you are considering doing this, if you're feeling called, if you're curious, come and check out our facilitator training at firstmooncircleschool.com/training. There you'll find our incredible circle of wisdom keepers who are our guest teachers. You'll find our course mentors. You'll discover everything we learn about and explore in the course, both from a personal healing and cycle and rite of passage reclamation journey, as well as understanding how to hold sacred transformational spaces, how to teach menstrual education to children, and how to grow a business that supports, nourishes, and aligns your mission. Places close on the 24th of March, 2023, or if all places go sooner than that. So if this calls to you, make sure that you fill out your application soon to avoid missing out. This is our only round for 2023. The next will be in 1 year's time in May 2024. So I hope to receive your application soon and that you'll consider joining us if this calls to you. Now, into today's episode. Welcome to the Wildflow podcast with me, Charlotte Pronto, certified cycle and feminine embodiment coach and shamanic womb guide. In this podcast, I'll share my wisdom and conversations with powerful change makers, thought leaders, and embodied teachers to invite you to live cyclically in flow with your menstrual cycle instead of fearing it, to heal menstrual shame and normalize womb wisdom and period positivity, and to step into your sovereign magnetic power to create and embody the change you desire to see in your world. Settle in to unleash your wild flow. What does nature, culture, and the sacred teach us about becoming the leader we need to be? For ourselves, for our communities, and the earth. Plenty, actually. As the world we inhabit crumbles around us, it takes courage, humility, deep listening skills, and activism to create a safer world that is respectful of women, people of marginalised identities, and greater values than chasing money and power to create resistance and change. And what can we singularly do about it? My guest on today's episode of Wildflow is Nina Simons. Nina is the co-founder and chief relationship officer at Bioneers, a non-profit that features and connects practical and visionary solutions for transforming how we relate to ourselves, each other, and the earth. Nina is recipient of the Goi Peace Award, and throughout her career she has worked with over 1,000 women leaders who are diverse across disciplines, race, age, class, and orientation to create conditions for mutual learning, trust, and leadership development. She produces and speaks at large-scale events to work intimately to help small, diverse groups of women leaders knit together to strengthen each other's work pursuing intersectional healing and ecological justice. This conversation inspired me so much. Nina and I touched on Nina's connection to her cyclical nature and the sacred in her postmenopausal years, her journey from theatre studies to becoming a change maker and activist, to how we can decolonize and decondition our beliefs around what leadership is, and how we can empower people with marginalised identities so that more women and underrepresented peoples can step into their leadership roles. How we can re-establish eldership, and especially by encouraging postmenopausal women to feel safe to be seen and to embody this leadership role so they can share the harvest of their life lessons. And how we can mentor young people to bring in their fresh ideas and energy to help change the world, and so much more besides. If you're leading the way in your community or in your work or your family, this conversation is for you. And if you also feel like you're resisting in any way embodying your full leadership potential, this too is a powerful transmission to receive. Tune in, soak it up, and enjoy. Today, it's my thrill and honor to invite and welcome Nina Simons onto Wild Flow. How are you today, Nina?
Oh, very pleased to be with you and with women all over the world, Charlotte. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. So
Mhm.
let's begin with, as we always do, a cycle check-in to orient ourselves to ourselves and our bodies and to each other and to the earth as well. So I'll share my cycle check-in first and then invite you to share what that means to you. So for me, today I am on day 11 of my menstrual cycle. I have a menstrual cycle, so that's my dominant experience of cycling at the minute. And so that feels to me like coming into I'm in my late inner spring phase and moving towards what would be my more ovulation phase coming up in a few days. And so I'm feeling like I've got more of a spring in my step and it's easier to get out of bed in the mornings and got more energy and resilience, and more aliveness. I feel more alive in my body, which feels lovely. And where I live in the Southern Hemisphere, we are in very early autumn, I would say, and still noticing the warm days, but the season's definitely shifting. We have passed what is known in the Celtic wheel of the year, which is my heritage. We have passed Lammas, which was the start of February and will be at the equinox at the end of March. So about halfway between those 2 points, and I can feel the nights shortening and the days, the sun not rising so bright and early in the morning. So yeah, I feel like there's a real shift happening in my body and in nature, and that's where I can feel the influence on that in myself. I feel quite transitional, kind of one foot in two worlds a little bit. So that would be my my check-in today, and I'd love to invite you to share as a postmenopausal woman whether you have a sense of a cycle within your body or your environment, whether that's something that you connect with and notice, and just how that feels for you today in this moment.
Mm. Well, very much so, Charlotte. I have had my menopause probably about 15 years ago. And it's so curious to me to hear you and recognize in relation to nature and cycles how different where you are and where I am are. So I am in the northern hemisphere. I'm in northern New Mexico. I'm very connected to cycles, um, although less so through my body and more so through the earth and moon and planets. Um, in many ways, I'm aware of rejiggering my relationship to this third chapter of my life, because I'm a student of Indigenous people's wisdom, and I have heard it said from many peoples that the third phase of a woman's life is when she gets to have herself. You know, the first phase, we are growing into ourselves. The second phase, we are in reproductive years. And in this phase, it feels to me like, as I went through menopause, I remember feeling like um, throughout the earlier part of my life, it felt like my temperature was regulated from outside my body. And suddenly in menopause, I got it that, oh no, my body's regulating my own temperature. No one else can feel this. It's all about what's going on in this body in relation to um, myself and my spirit. And that was actually a rather exciting way to reorient around hot flashes and menopausal experience. And what I'm finding, especially throughout this pandemic time, is that my connection to the land has deepened so much from staying home, from not traveling, and and I'm aware of, we're at the tail, not the tail end yet. We're sort of about 60% through our winter, and it's a very cold winter up here. And we've had a lot more snow than I'm accustomed to. So I've been shoveling and hauling wood, and and it also enlivens me to be in the winter. I think because I'm a winter birth, it kind of feels like familiar territory to me. And I'm just getting ready in a week to leave for a week-long women's gathering that I'm co-convening. And I'm feeling a huge quickening and excitement in myself to re-enter that after 4 years of not being able to do it. It's one of the things that my heart just feasts on, and it's such a joy, or is so nourished by, is a better way to say it. It's such a joy to be anticipating. So I'm looking towards the days getting longer and springtime, and I'm very aware of my own psyche in relation to the moon cycles. Um, and because I'm a student of astrology, I also notice the planetary cycles and how they may be affecting me. So I feel much more connected to the entire universe than I ever did earlier in my life. Thanks for asking.
Thank you for sharing. What a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
answer, a rich answer. First of all, 60% through winter. Oh my gosh, that feels like a very long winter. And do you get a sense, I'm just curious, of, you said you're winter born and you say you're comfortable here, but are you at that point where you feel like, oh, hurry up and just be done already? Or can you sit in that experience of winter and be with it?
I've got a little bit of the hurry up and be done with it, is the truth be told.
Mm,
Partly because it's just been so cold and windy. And,
mm,
you know, that degree of cold and wind is a little hard to take. And also, where I'm traveling to do this gathering, they also are experiencing more cold and snow than ever before. So I think everybody up here is a little shell shocked by the dramatic changes in the weather and how
mm,
very unpredictable it's become.
Yeah,
But, you
hearing
know,
it.
at the same time as I have that hurry up spring thing, I'm also really happy that we're getting so much moisture because I live
Mm,
in the high desert and it's so good for the forest that surrounds my home. And I'm so grateful for that protection. So,
mm,
yeah.
mm. Amazing. Yeah, thank you. That's so important. What a beautiful perspective that the earth is, even though it's uncomfortable, the earth is perhaps in a state of flux, but redressing some balance and bringing moisture back into the soils, which lends a sense of protection to you, which is
Mm.
no, yeah, all these things influence us, don't they? And how nice to be able, after 4 years, to be able to sit with women again and do
Oh,
do this work. Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have just re-released your book quite recently, and it's called Nature, Culture, and the Sacred: A Woman Listens for Leadership. And it's a beautiful book. I have been reading it. And you've crafted a really important legacy of work with Bioneers. I would love to start this conversation with asking you to share with us what this book is about and why you wrote it.
Hmm. Thank you for that. It's not a simple answer, actually. I find myself, imagining all the ways I can approach this answer. So, um, part of what the book is about is that when I turned 40, I began being recognized for my leadership, and I didn't like it. I felt like I hadn't earned it. I didn't like being named that way. I felt like it painted a target on my back. And and so I began an inquiry because I had learned through Bioneers, which is this nonprofit organization that I have been co-shepherding for 34 years. I had learned from hosting conferences and hearing a lot of brilliant speakers that we're all called to be leaders in this time. And I thought, well, if I don't like being called a leader and we're all called to be leaders, then what's wrong with that picture? So I began exploring that. And at the same time, I encountered, uh, I had recently encountered a film online, which many of your listeners may have heard of, called The Burning Times. And The Burning Times is a remarkable film that was made in the early 90s by a Canadian woman filmmaker. And it's a little dated, but it tells the tremendously important story of the 300-year period in European history that had correlatives all around the world at various times, where somewhere between 50,000 and millions of women were systematically persecuted and tortured and burned for the supposed crime of being witches. And when I saw that film, it was just this huge awakening for me, where I realized how much my gender had been affecting my lived experience. And so I set on a path of exploring women and leadership and what the legacy of the Burning Times might still be. Because when I saw that film, I knew that something left over from that period of time lived on in my system. And it helped me understand why I had an otherwise inexplicable fear of speaking my truth in public. And the third thing that I should mention about what the book's about is that soon after I turned 40, I made myself a promise because I really wanted to understand what my soul brought me to this life on earth to express. Because whatever happened in my life, I wanted to be sure that I came as close to that as I could. And so I really set about this journey of unpacking who I thought I was, what my belief systems were, and which of them came from lived experience, which of them came from cultural training that I had never consciously wanted. And in the meantime, I was hosting this annual conference every year. And every year we host about, well, over 100 luminaries, people who are innovators from all walks of life who have practical and visionary solutions for restoring our relationship to ourselves, each other, and the earth. And when I first started co hosting Bioneers, I thought, what do I have to say to these people? Most of what I did was to help give introductions that really helped lift up the leaders who we were hosting. And over time, as I worked on myself, I began to think, well, maybe I do have something to say. And maybe I can overcome this legacy from the burning times. And so each year I wrote a short talk to be delivered at Bioneers, which was a talk that was intended to offer the best of my learning in a very humble way, about myself, about leadership, and about women, and later about racial equity and justice, to this gathering of very diverse people. And so the book brings together those talks that I wrote over a period of many years. And what it also weaves together with that is, and the essays that I wrote, the talks that I wrote, some of them, as you know, Charlotte, are very personal. And some of them are written as poetry and some as narrative. And during that same time, I started hosting and co-hosting groups of women leaders to help cultivate their and my own leadership in a week-long immersion gathering. And so I learned a great deal about facilitating groups and about helping create the conditions for people to learn. And so what the book contains also is not only all those essays sort of organized into sections that make sense, and that describe different chapters of my own learning, but also these discussion guides and embodied practices that came from my experience convening all those women. So what I felt was I wanted to offer women of the world a kind of breadcrumb trail of what worked for me, and very humbly say, here are the questions that might help you to apply all these things to your own life and learning. Because I do think that the leadership of women is one of the most important and greatest hopes for all of humanity in this time. So it's really my offering after about 25 years of learning and exploring.
And what a gift it is too. Thank you. Thank you for summarizing in your words what brought you to sharing this book and your journey, and your own personal excavation of your inner leader, as it were. And I really hear you on having this innate, perhaps not logical, rational sense of fear of speaking publicly. I have felt it so much, and I've heard people describe it as the witch wound, the wound of speaking up, of leading, of healing, of offering women's wisdom. And to me, I've really felt it. And actually doing this podcast has been a real healing process for me to speak, to speak and to embrace that very role that you're describing in my own way. Because I think it's something that a lot of women really do experience.
I bet.
Absolutely.
Can I just add something, Charlotte? Yeah. I mean, as I've reflected on it over the years, what I've come to believe, one of the things that they say in the film is that 7 generations of children witnessed their mothers and sisters and aunties and grandmothers all get systematically persecuted. And I've come to believe that actually that what you describe as the witch wound, I believe it lives on, and science has been proving epigenetic trauma. I believe that it lives on not only in the women, because I think it may be part of the wound that men are feeling in this time as well. Because it's not only the women that are targeted, of course, it's the feminine in all people and in all of our ideas and our policies and our ways of doing things that have been undervalued and systematically imbalanced.
And do you think that as more women take leadership roles, and we'll talk much more about taking leadership roles, but from this sense of men experiencing this wound too, Do you have a sense that as more women step into this leadership and speak up, and women have more rights and more of a platform, there might be this experience of men of fear about what may happen to the women, as would have happened in the burning times?
Mm. That's such a good question. I and what you suggest is not my first or second response. My first two responses were that I think that because we are all products of a patriarchal, capitalist, colonialist culture, men are reacting to women in leadership with a great fear that as women rise up in leadership, that it's going to diminish them, because in patriarchal culture, it's a zero-sum game, right? So I think that's part of what we're experiencing in the rise of authoritarian behavior and in the kind of aggressive victim culture that's often being expressed by men in this time. But the other thing that I think I'm encouraged by is that there have been studies that say that until a minority has reached 30%, they don't feel flanked enough to fully speak out and to bring their whole selves. And in my limited small scale experimentation, that seems to be true. Because when I read about that, we instituted a minimum of 30% women of color in each of our gatherings, and it changed things immediately, and made sure we had one woman of color in co-facilitation. And both of those things dramatically shifted everything. So, I think it's a both and. I think that we're in a time of so many both ands, and that, there will be reactions to women ascending, and to women speaking their truth. And I don't know that it's going to be an easy change, but I'm somehow taking it on as part of my ridiculous assignment to be able to encourage men to embrace their feminine and the feminine all around them, and support women in leadership, because we need them, and we need their help soon. I would say, for the sake of the earth and all life.
I agree. I really agree. And thank you for sharing that. That's fascinating about the 30% rule. I think that that's really important for us to take away. And one thing I did want to ask you about, and we might jump to that now, just to elaborate on that, was how can we, you're talking about in your book, you've said that you really value and who you've been learning from Indigenous cultures. How can we center their wisdom and the voices of Indigenous people in a way that elevates their wisdom and deep knowing, and without and in a way that lends of cultivates safety for those people, but also in a way without we're not appropriating, because that's something I'm very mindful of and ever learning. And I wondered if you'd want to share with us about what you've learned about that.
Sure. It's such a good question, Charlotte, and thank you for asking it. I think that, as people who are non-Indigenous to where we are living, or settlers, many of us have a tendency to almost unconsciously assume a certain kind of superiority. And I think that is something that it's necessary, if one chooses to deepen relationship with their wisdom and some Indigenous people wherever you are, that it's necessary to approach with tremendous humility, with real awareness of how much harm has been done for how many hundreds of years, and with a sense of generosity, of wanting to show up in support, not in support of what we think they need, but actually showing up just with hands and readiness and care, saying, I care, how can I help? Or, and also, I think there are two other things that I would add. One is that I think it's very important to learn about the people you're interested in learning from. And so to not just go as a complete naive, I don't know anything, teach me, because in fact, that's requesting an unpaid labor that they don't need to do. They would probably say, teach yourself. I feel like part of what I keep learning is that I'm often learning how to be a good human being from teachers who are willing to show up and teach. But the other thing that I wanted to say is that the other thing that I think is really important and true is that we're all indigenous to Mother Earth. And it's important in that situation, I think, that we all learn about our own ancestors and be able, so that we're not sort of cultureless people saying, come fill my bowl, but we're coming with our own bowl full of who our ancestors were and what they have been through and where they came from. And in that way, I think we can find common cause if we do it with tremendous humility and patience and a real awareness that almost all of the indigenous peoples that I've ever met relate through protocols. And those protocols are very important to them. And, they introduce themselves by saying the land they come from and their parents and grandparents. And, they often have other affiliations that they want to name. And they can be very formal that way. And it's very important to actually learn the protocols of who you want to meet. And as I say, just approach with a mindfulness of what you're interested in and what you're asking, and take full responsibility for educating yourself before approaching anyone.
Wise words. Thank you for that, and really appreciate the gift of your insight and experience in this. I know a lot of people listening are concerned with respecting the land that they live on, especially here in Australia, where it's stolen lands. And I, as a white woman from England, I live on the Gundungurra country. It's the Aboriginal name for the country where this land where I live now. And I know that a lot of people are interested in reparation work and honoring, but also needing to understand how to engage and how to do it in a respectful way. So I think these conversations can be challenging for people, but I think it's really important for us to have. And so I'm grateful for you speaking to this and speaking so vulnerably and with courage, really, and transparency on what you have learned and mistakes you have made. And you've spoken to some of that in your book. I think it's such rich reading, and an invitation for all of us to really do, as you say, our own work as well on this.
I can illustrate something that I said, Charlotte, also with a short story of something that happened. We were convening a group of women online on Zoom, and it was a multicultural group with a few Native American women and many other cultures represented. And what's happening in this country is that people who are concerned about that are being mindful to introduce themselves and where they are by honoring the native peoples who live there, because this is all stolen land too, this entire nation. And um, and one of the first times that we did this with a Native American woman leader on the call, she heard everybody who was non-native introduce themselves by citing the native peoples whose land they were on. And by the time it got to her, she was weeping because she said, I've never heard a group of multicultural people do that so honoringly. Thank you. And so, these things mean a lot.
Mm. Mm. Oh, wow. I feel really moved. In Australia, we have this practice that some people overseas don't understand what we're doing. And the Aboriginal elders can welcome you to country, but for a non-Aboriginal person, we can do what's called an acknowledgement of country. And that is to speak the name of the land where you live and to pay respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledging that sovereignty was never ceded. And it's something that I find that we can do and speak quite easily. And not everyone might understand what you're doing, but we are creating space and raising awareness of that we are on occupied land, but also that I think it's important that we find our way to still connect with that land as well and find a different way of belonging to it so that we can live in respectful harmony with that land too. Do you have any practices for communing with the land in that kind of way where you are?
Yes. Well, and I was going to mention before I answer your question that, part of what's exciting about relating to Indigenous people's wisdom in this time is that, at Bioneers, we sometimes refer to Native peoples as the first Bioneers because they actually have known how to live in right relationship to the land for millennia. And as we are addressing climate instability, increasingly policymakers are turning to Indigenous peoples to help guide them in how do we manage, forests in a good way, and how do we do this differently? Because clearly modern science has not, and modern ecology has not necessarily done anything as well as they did years and years ago. The ritual, I learned from a Native person that ritual creates relationship. And when a year or so ago, there was a wildfire that was threatening, it was close enough that our home felt really threatened. And we had to have all the windows closed, and the smoke was terrible. And it was frightening because we do live surrounded by forest. And so I reached out to a friend who had studied with Peruvian traditional teachers. And I knew that she had done ceremony that had helped her protect her land from a wildfire. And I asked her if she could teach me what she knew. And she told me to identify a tree that was near my home that felt sacred or important to me, and to begin to ritually place flowers around the trunk of the tree, and do that as many times a week as I could, while pouring water around the trunk of the tree, and sometimes wine as an offering, and sending prayers as I did that, to thank the tree for its protection, to ask its forgiveness, to send my gratitude down through its roots into the soil and up through its branches to the heavens, and through its branches also to the nearby mountain that protects us. And I found that, like any ritual, when I did it long enough, after 6 or 8 weeks, I started feeling a different quality of gratitude and connection with the land.
Mm.
And I began a practice that when I walk our dogs in the woods, I would send gratitude through the bottoms of my feet into Mother Earth for protecting us. And I do feel in many ways like all of the goodness that my husband and I have received in this lifetime and that our work has generated in this lifetime is actually in no small part from the blessings that the earth has conferred upon us. And so, yeah, I offer that anyone can do anywhere. And it feels awfully good. And that same tree has actually been struck by lightning since I did that, but not blown apart. We've had 2 or 3 trees actually blown apart on our land. This
Wow.
one just has a little scar way up. It's sort of like a Harry Potter scar on its on its bark. And I think, wow, thank you for taking that hit for us.
Mm.
And I'm so grateful that you're okay and healthy.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that as an example of Indigenous ritual that we can respectfully work with in our own way to connect with our land as well, and to offer healing and ask for forgiveness on that land too. That feels really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah. Mm. The trees are absolutely speaking to us and living and breathing with us at all times, aren't they?
Well, they are. And the funny thing, Charlotte, is that it always delights me when science proves something that Indigenous peoples and our intuition have known a long time. Like, for instance, plants can actually perceive color and
Mm.
they can tell if you're wearing a red shirt or a blue shirt. And the mycelium that's under the ground actually responds to low frequency sound. So when you
Mm.
do a ritual and you beat a drum, the mycelium can hear it. The mycelium responds to the thunder. I mean, it's just more and more evidence that the whole world is sentient and that we are not, we are not the lords of all we survey. We would do well to remember that we are the young cousins of everything around us and have a
Mm.
lot to learn from them and it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. The young cousins. Yes. Yes. Yeah. We are another species, just like everything else
Mm.
on this planet, too. Yeah. So I want to ask you about leadership. And this is
Mm.
your, the crux of your work. So, first of all, with this link to Indigenous wisdom. So, people of all ages have a role to play in leadership, don't they? And it's not just this patriarchal system that we live in, which is rooted in white supremacy and misogyny. And the average person thinks of a leader as being, an older white man in charge and telling everybody what we need and what the solutions
Mm.
are. And ultimately, you know, very self-interested responses too. We all have a role to play in the stewardship of this world. And particularly, I really believe, and I've received some wisdom on this that I want to share with you and invite you to ponder on too, is there's 2 main camps potentially that could really change the world. And one of those is the younger ones, the next generation, the young people who are coming through with new ideas and new energy and an invigoration for providing and generating solutions to old and new problems. And the other group is postmenopausal women, the wise, older, more mature women. Um, both of these age groups are considered by the dominant culture and certainly by those in power to be irrelevant and to be not knowing and not powerful and not made for leadership. And I think it's fair to say that both age groups are roundly dismissed. And I heard from my teacher, Jane Hardwick Collins, that she was taught by an Aboriginal elder woman of the lands near where I live, Wiradjuri land, this elder named Minmaya. She says that the grandmother's role is to weave the dreams for the grandchildren. And that if menopause works a woman into her wisdom, into seeing clearly what's important and letting go of perhaps all the stuff that isn't, into her wise woman power, how can we reestablish? I'm really interested in this idea of reestablishing eldership. And I don't know if it's returning, well, I think it is returning the postmenopausal grandmother leader to her role as it would have been in more ancient times, when the crone council would have guided and decided and had stewardship. What would you do you have any ideas on how we can do this in modern times?
Well, yes, and it's a tall order. It may take many lifetimes to achieve what you're describing on a widespread scale, but what we can do certainly is to practice honoring elders and creating spaces where elder women and young people can come together. A beautiful friend and colleague of mine once suggested that we embrace the idea of mutual mentorship, because clearly when elder women and youth come together, I have as much to learn from a young person as they might have to learn from me. So I think that that's something we can all do wherever we are, whether it's small or large ways. I think one of the biases of the patriarchy is everything has to be big, and it doesn't. It's just not true. So, I would say practice with your own grandchildren and see if you can set up. I'm sorry, I have a whining dog. 1 second. Zephyr, no, go lie down.
I love that so much.
She figures if she whines at me enough, she'll get her way. Which usually is true, but not this minute. So I think experimenting with that. But the other thing that I want to say is that I actually believe the women of the world of all ages are particularly equipped for leadership in this time. And here's why I want to say that. I'm coming to believe one of my teachers is an amazing woman named Joanna Macy. And when Joanna Macy wrote a blurb for my book, she wrote something which I wasn't able to really take in until about 2 years after. And what she wrote was something like, Nina not only understands the unique gifts that women bring to leadership, but the way that obstacles and hardship can strengthen those gifts. And so I've been thinking a lot about how, nature formed us to be able to bear children, which, as far as I'm concerned, is not only miraculous, but one of the most difficult and painful events, and also luminous and mysterious and magnificent that any woman can do. And I've come to believe that parenting is a tremendous form of leadership, and this kind of speaks back to the thread that I heard you raise, Charlotte, about how I believe we're all reinventing leadership in this time. That my first book was called Moonrise, The Power of Women Leading from the Heart. And it's got 3 men in it, but it's a beautiful exploration, because after I knew how much I hated being called a leader, I had to explore to understand what are some models of leadership that I can wholeheartedly aspire to. And
Mm.
they're very different than that patriarchal model, you know? And in a nutshell, what I found was that our conventional model of leadership confers authority from the outside in, whereas the leaders that I most admired, they were called by what they loved and what they found most sacred. And so their authority came from the inside out. And, rather than being a singular leader at the top of the pyramid, they all modeled leadership that was collaborative and involved lifting others up. And there are a bunch more things, but basically they were unafraid to say I don't know and to ask for the help of others. And there are just all these ways, and so I think rather than the tall white guy with the graduate degree or the inheritance or the title at the front of the room, I think we need to start looking at each other all as leaders and recognize that we're each leading in our own very particular and unique way. And as women, we have a tremendous capacity to strengthen each other's leadership, which was the biggest reason I wrote the book, because I
Mm.
want to encourage women to sit in circle and to turn to your friends and say, what do you think are my best gifts? Because often others can see us much more clearly than we can see ourselves. And it helps us to grow into our own flourishing, to rely on
Mm.
our sisters,
Mm.
and to really experience the antidote to the patriarchal model of the catfight and competition, and instead be an authentic allyship, and say, I'm invested in you being your best self. And I really only you can know what that is, but I can help if you let
Mm.
me.
Mm. Mm. And you've mentioned about how we are in this, one of the reasons we're in this pickle is because of this imbalance between the masculine and feminine within all of us, people of all genders as well. And I know your work is with women. Is there a way we can encourage or make it safe for men to embrace their feminine qualities, this collaborative, um, you said listening to each other, allyship,
Yes,
admitting when you're
of course.
wrong.
Yeah.
Mm. This is something
Mm.
that's available to all of us. Yeah, just wanted to just raise that and
Sure.
invite you to speak to
Well,
that.
and one of my favorite reviews on Amazon, and if you do read the book, please give me a review on Amazon. That would be a great gift. One of my favorite ones is from a man who said, I love this book because it's helping me understand my wife and my daughters better. And I was like, oh, that's great.
Mm.
And as a convener and a facilitator, I would suggest that, for one thing, we all get to influence our partners, whatever gender they may be. Um, that's part of being in a relationship. And as parents, we certainly get to influence our children, again,
Mm.
of any gender, and make it safe for boys to feel and to embrace other parts of themselves beyond the Hollywood model, which is so egregious and vicious and lopsided. But I think that as conveners, I'm experimenting with a number of ways. Like I'm just designing a course with a colleague that we're calling Sacred Activism, and it's open to people of all genders. And it really is exploring how you reclaim the relational aspects of leadership. Um, but it's not calling it uh, a feminist training, you know?
Mm.
So there will be some men who come and take this workshop with us, I hope, I believe. And over time, I think as more and more men engage with other aspects of the world, with spiritual practice, um, and with a desire to be closer to their children and their partners and their families, that we are heading in that direction. And we just need to encourage them every way we can imagine. And I think also we have to find creative ways to tell the story of win-win scenarios. And, and to explain, I do think that a lot of men still imagine that feminism means women on top, and it doesn't, and so I think we have to sort of take apart that myth and counter it with better stories of how, women in equality makes it better for everyone and for the earth, by the way,
Absolutely. Oh,
yeah.
Incredible work. And may it be so that more and more men come to this work and come to your trainings as well. I want to end with a stunning poem that is in your book. No, I won't read the whole thing. It goes for a few pages, but the last line of it just blew me away. And the words are, "The world shifts every time a woman speaks her truth. May that be so." And I just wanted to invite you to call women, rally women into really reclaiming and reframing this leadership, as we've spoken so much about. And it has to do with really decolonizing, doesn't it? That and exploring our biases and really rooting out our internalized patriarchy so that we can say, I am a leader and I have something to share, and here's how I'm going to role model that. Would you like to speak to that?
Sure. I believe that we're all here on Earth for a reason at this time. And I don't think it's an accident that any of us is here. And as human beings, we are social at our core, and we're also meaning-making creatures and storytelling creatures. One of the things I talk about a lot in the book is how powerful it is as a leadership skill to tell or express stories, whether you're an artist or a musician or a singer or a storyteller. And so, I feel like the journey that I have walked in my life thus far has been one of peeling away layers and layers and layers and layers, and I'm still peeling them away, of unconsciously assumed conditioning, and noticing where I get fearful, and noticing, what patterns I want to change next, because I feel like cultivating my own leadership, which is another way of saying cultivating in the truest sense who I feel my soul brought me here to become, is the work of a lifetime. And it's more, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's painful, absolutely. But we have the opportunity to shift stories where we carry ourselves as a victim to stories that are about how Mother Life is strengthening and honing us. And we have the opportunity every time to flip our stories if they're not serving us. And what I've found is that if we carry a really strong, clear intention, we can cultivate ourselves with the help of sisters, especially, into flourishing into our most glorious and radiant and truest ways of living. And that's the most joyful way I can imagine to live, especially in this time that asks so much of us. So I would encourage everyone listening, in whatever way you choose to embark on that process, because nothing is a given. Free choice is very real. And I am so delighted and encouraged by how much I've been able to change myself in the last 25 years and to shed so much of my self-limiting, self-doubting, self-judging behaviors, and to be much freer. On some sense, this is about how to free ourselves and how to free ourselves to serve in the most beautiful, honoring way what we most love and want to protect. And if we're not here for that, I do think somewhere in our cycle awareness, we're all mothers, whether we are biological mothers or not. And so may we all flourish into our very best service while caring well for this instrument that is the vehicle of our service.
Beautiful. What glorious words to end on. Thank you so much, Nina. I've learned so much from you. I'm really grateful for you joining us and for sharing so much knowledge, and your incredible book. Your work is so important. I can feel that it's creating real ripples, and may that continue. If somebody is listening and they want to find your book or work with you, or are you doing any Bioneers conferences at all in person anymore, or
well, we are. The next one is in early April, so it's coming up rather soon, and it's in Berkeley, California, but it's only in person. What I can offer is that my book is available both in audiobook and ebook and hard, paperback. And if listeners would like to, you can tune in to bioneers.org/NCS book. And there you'd be able to download a free e-introduction to the book, which would give you a sense of whether you might want to explore it further or not. And along the way, you'll have an opportunity to sign up for the Bioneers newsletter, which is fabulous. And we're going to be launching something this year called Bioneers Learning. And that's where I'll be offering my sacred activism workshop and other workshops related to the book, which folks will be able to join us for online. And you can find out about any of that by being on the Bioneers newsletter list or going to my website, ninasimons.com. And thank you so much, Charlotte. What a privilege to be here with you.
As it is for me. Thank you. I really encourage everyone to grab a copy of this book, especially if you are somebody who's trying to embrace your leadership role in any capacity. If you are here to do important work, if you're here to reclaim, your inner leader, but your sense of duty and capacity to help shape this world and this earth that we live on as well. It's such a beautiful offering, and I'm really grateful to speak to you about it. So the book again is called Nature, Culture and the Sacred, A Woman Listens for Leadership. Fabulous. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Charlotte, so very much.
Thank you so much for listening in. If you're loving this podcast and you'd love to help me spread the wisdom shared, please leave a review or rating, or share this with somebody who you think would love to listen in. I'm really passionate about creating ripples of change and getting this information to more women, girls, and people with a cycle so that they can reclaim their cyclic natures too. And if you'd love to dive in deeper with learning more about how to connect with your cycle and rites of passages, come and join our free Wild Flow Circle community, or choose a course and learn with me on my online learning hub. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, be well and go with the flow of your cyclic nature.